This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Thank you for tuning in this week's NC Spin. We've said goodbye to 2019 and look forward to sharing another year with you, a year that promises to be significant. There are two big themes we're watching, politics and the economy. So on this program, we want to examine both and provide you some insights as to what you can expect. And joining our regular panel will be two of our most respected analysts in these fields, so let's introduce them to you. Mike Walden, who is the William Neal Reynolds Distinguished Professor of Economics at NC State University. John Hood, syndicated columnist and author. Chris Fitzsimon, who's director of the Newsroom. And Chris Cooper, the chair of political science at Western Carolina University. We'll begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages from our underwriters.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Today's tools make you a real DIYer, and as a member of an electric cooperative, you have lots of valuable tools to help you do it yourself in controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad.
12,000 North Carolina veterans are uninsured with no options to buy health insurance. They fought for us. Now let's fight for them. Let's create a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured.
To learn more, visit careforcarolina.com.
Thank you for joining us for a new year here on NC Spin. As we begin a new year, we also welcome Nick Fuchs, who's moving on our production crew over from director to become our producer, and Jody Dishner, who is becoming our director on the show. Well, on our first show, we're going to be looking back at our state's economy. Mike Walden is the William Neal Reynolds Distinguished Professor of Economics, as I told you, at NC State, and a voice many of us count on for making sense out of a complicated subject. Mike, you've said our state has enjoyed growth and an expanding economy for the past several years, and each month you publish a report, which I enjoy reading, by the way, showing us where we stand and where we might be headed. Our state economy is tied, as you've said, to the national economy. There's no question our nation has enjoyed several years of growth, and there are many saying they're wondering whether they're, particularly with the stock market, as wild as it's been, a recession in our future. You've said you don't think it's going to happen in 2020. Explain it.
Well, I give 75% chance to no recession, 25% chance to a recession. So if there is one, at least I've got my side
covered your bases there. That's a good economist there.
But no, the debt balance sheet for households is very good. Government balance sheet's going up, more debt, but that will slow growth, not stop it. The sector I worry most about is the business sector. They have become very optimistic. You can tell that in their borrowing. If you look at their borrowing compared to their market value, it's at a moderate level. If we do have some geopolitical event like happened this morning with the strike in the Middle East, that could cause people to be concerned about the economic future.
And the market reacted immediately.
The market reacted, the market go down. That could affect businesses. They may not be able to keep the number of employees they have. So that's my biggest concern right now. The stock market, geopolitical events, that impact on businesses. But the consumer is in very good shape.
Yeah, and Chris, as far as it goes, the head of the Charlotte branch of the Federal Reserve spoke recently to a Chamber of Commerce event, and he said, expansion economies, growth economies like we've had in this nation and in this state for many years don't die, they're murdered. They're usually events that cause this to happen. Politically, do you see any big events that might disrupt this growth?
No, it's been a boring political time lately. I don't see anything change. No, that's, I think, things
Knitted
will
a lot?
change. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
No, I think things will change. I think, yes, this is obviously a time of extreme uncertainty both at the federal level and at the state level. So I think anything's possible. And I think, as Mike talked about, that could certainly affect
Mike,
the
you're
economy.
saying what you watch, you don't watch the stock market as much as you do, because it is an indicator of the economy, but it is not the economy. You watch job creation.
Well, job creation is important because that feeds in the consumer. The consumer accounts for 70% of spending. So yes, the fact that we've had a good job market, unemployment rates at 50-year lows, that's certainly good for the consumer sector. But I am concerned about the stock market in terms of getting ahead of itself. And again, especially if something out there happens that we just can't predict that's adverse to the economy and expectations, we could see a big correction in the stock market, which would feed back on the business sector. That's my chain
So
of
you
events
said
that I worry
nationally
about.
you're looking at 125, 150,000 jobs a month. Statewide, 5,000, 6,000 jobs a month?
That's right, yes, and that's a little down from where we've been, but one of the issues right now in the economy is we're full up in terms of workers. The people who have skills and can work have been employed. What we need to start doing is whittle into those folks who are of working age, but they have issues like opioid addictions, and try to get them into the workforce. That, I think, is a challenge, and I think we'll see more of that, and I think we'll see businesses perhaps take the lead on that.
One of the things that I read over the holidays is the fact that the income disparity is the greatest right now that it's been since the 1920s. Why is this? Is it due to our tax policies? What is it?
No, it's not due to tax policy. In fact, it's not really obvious. There are lots of different analyses that go in different directions. Some of the problems are simply the choice of data and what you choose to measure, how you choose to adjust the data. The argument that some people's incomes have stagnated and the wealthy have gone up, that is dependent upon choices of inflation adjustments and things like that. It's a little murkier. Here's something that we do know, for I think almost everybody would agree, is that productivity, the gains of productivity are slower than they used to be. And that affects everybody's well-being over time, because productivity and income, productivity and wages really are still pretty closely connected. So productivity is the question. Mike was getting at one of the challenges. Once you get beyond, you get all the people employed who are ready to be employed, willing to be employed, have high skill levels. What do we do next? We have lots of people in North Carolina and around the country who don't have jobs. Now, what we're talking about are mostly people who aren't looking for jobs. And the question is, why not? And what needs to be done to help that group of disaffected workers, or marginally attached workers more generally as they call it, move into the workforce and into employment.
But Chris, one of the things that is obvious is the fact that middle income wages have been they've grown some, but they haven't grown in proportion. And a lot of that has to do with additional skills training.
Well, it does. It also changes I think one of the lines, and politicians of both parties have done this a long time. If you're a 50-year-old factory worker and the factory closes, you're not going to be coding, whether Joe Biden says you're going to be coding tomorrow or a Republican politician says that. It's just simply unrealistic. I don't think we figured out a way yet what to do really with middle-aged displaced workers. I still do. I'm glad you raised wage inequality. I disagree a little bit. I just saw a statistic recently. The top 400 wealthiest people in the world, their income is now, I think, $4 trillion. Has gone up dramatically faster than anybody else's. So there still is a wage inequality problem, of income and wealth inequality problem, and I think a lot of people in the lower middle class especially sense that every day and are trying to figure out, if everything is so great, why are their lives still not as great as we've been told?
Mike, going back to North Carolina, we were known for many years as a manufacturing and agricultural state. Manufacturing fled our state back in the 70s and 80s and went offshore and so forth like that. Do you see any signs that manufacturing is picking up? And you spoke one time and said that the manufacturing we see will not hire as many people.
That's right, and we've had a little bit of pickup in manufacturing employment since the Great Recession in it, but not a lot. In fact, since the mid-90s, we've lost half of our manufacturing workers in North Carolina. And I think the long run is for manufacturing will still be an important sector. It's how it's done. It's not going to be done as much by people. And we're still restructuring. I think that's one of the issues in income inequality and some of the other issues we see in North Carolina. We are still restructuring. For example, manufacturing is still downsizing in North Carolina, particularly in terms terms of people. Agriculture has taken a hit because of the trade wars. These two industries primarily affect the rural parts of our state out of the big metros. That's a continuing issue, and I think it does feed into retraining. How do we take that 40-year-old displaced manufacturing worker, give him or her new skills, and get them into a job? And oftentimes the job is not going to be where they currently live. So moving people to jobs, I think, is also a big issue.
Speak a little bit more to agriculture. It's a $90 billion a year contributor to our economy in North Carolina. And farmers have had several really bad years.
They've had price problems in terms of the world price for products. They work in an international market, so the price is not set by them. It's a worldwide price. Price has been down because countries like Brazil are producing a lot also. But the trade war, the trade scuffle with China in particular, has hurt agriculture in North Carolina. I do think there's a positive outlook for agriculture in North Carolina, particularly in our meat production, although with this interest in non-meat meat, and in fact I wrote about this in my 2017 book, that could be a big game changer for North Carolina agriculture. We start producing meat not with meat. That could be devastating for our pork industry, for example.
But so far as it goes, how badly have the tariff wars affected our farmers?
Oh, I think big time. We are down, I don't have the numbers in my head, but we are down 25 to 30% in terms of our exports.
Any signs that it might be improving?
Well, we've had this phase one agreement apparently done with China. Yeah. The president says he will sign it soon. That's a step in the right direction, but I think we need to solve these issues with trade issues with China. I think there have been legitimate issues there. It's the way we've gone about it.
Isn't it the case that the federal aid has helped some farmers who are affected by the tariffs, but tobacco farmers are not eligible for that.
Right.
So the lost tobacco markets are not being replaced.
Chris, one of the things that I have found interesting is that we're talking on the subject of agriculture. Mm-hmm. There's no question about the fact that, particularly in the rural east and the far west, farmers went wildly in favor of voting for Donald Trump in 2016. You talk to them today, and even though they are being adversely affected by this economy, they're still supporting Trump.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that just shows that elections are about more than just the economy. The economy is going to be the number one issue in any election, but there are other things. And what politicians do is to try to draw our attention to the things that tend to benefit them. And I think there's nobody better at drawing our attention than Donald Trump.
The tweeter-in-chief?
The tweeter-in-chief. Call him what you will. He's good at drawing attention.
So how is this economy going to affect politically North Carolina? Let's look at that for just a second, particularly as it relates to statewide issues. Governor Cooper and others who are going to be running. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the thing to look at there is perceptions of the economy. So the actual economy, which I think Mike talks about so well, certainly matters for our daily lives, but the key to elections is how do people perceive the economy? And I think this is where issues like income inequality may come into play. So if we get metrics that say the state is doing well, but people don't feel that or don't perceive that, I think that's what's difficult for incumbents.
Also, you're running a governor, whether it's right or not, and I'm not passing judgment on who's right at the moment, although I'm happy to, is the Governor Cooper is going to say he's elected, the economy's doing well. The legislature is going to say we've been in power for 10 years, the economy's doing well.
Yeah.
So everybody's going to claim credit if people think the economy's doing well, and it is easier.
Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger wrote an op-ed piece about that.
Right, but it's also easier for a governor to people know who the governor is. They don't think of the legislature in general as a whole as in charge of the economy, even though they do pass a lot of laws, obviously, and tax cuts and a lot of other things.
And it's kind of the reverse. What Chris described is the reverse dynamic of what we saw 4 years ago, where the Democrats in North Carolina were trying to defeat an incumbent Republican governor and said the economy's not doing well. But at the same time, the Republicans are trying to defeat what had been Democratic rule in Washington, saying the messages get confused when you have a party that controls the White House but not the governor's mansion.
Yeah, it depends on which team you're on. Well, as we said at the beginning of the program, in addition to the economy, the other big topic is going to be politics in 2020. Many of us believe that these 2020 elections may be the most significant most of us have seen in our lifetime. Chris Cooper, we welcome you to the show because of the expertise that you bring to us as head of political science at Western Carolina University. In looking at this, most pundits are saying the upcoming election is going to be all about Donald Trump. Agree or disagree?
It's not all about Donald Trump. These other issues are going to matter. The economy is going to matter. Education is going to matter. Whether we have a state budget or not will probably matter. But look, Trump is going to be the number one issue. I think you see that even if you just look at people's Facebook pages and Twitter accounts of folks that are running for office. We have folks right now that are running for county commission who are posting about impeachment, about somebody they will probably never meet. So I think this just shows the growing nationalization of American politics. What that means is that local and state offices are increasingly queued based on what's happening
But Chris,
nationally.
doesn't that also speak to the tribal nature of where we are in politics?
Oh, it does, absolutely. Although that's been happening in North Carolina, I think, for quite a while. Trump is sort of the embodiment of it. He didn't create it. I think he's more a symptom than he is a result of it, as he is embodying it himself.
John, I wrote a column this week on the 2020 elections. By the way, your column this week on 10 things that ought to get done in 2020, I thought was very, very good. And
I have 10 good ideas every year or so.
Well, it was curious that both Republicans and Democrats seemed to like that column, so maybe you need to tweak that some. Anyway, I said this campaign was going to be expensive and nasty. You agree with that?
Yes, but isn't that a safe bet with pretty much any election
Well, I
cycle?
usually don't try to
expensive,
go out
it's
too
gonna be
far on
nasty. It's important to remember, though, that yes, there's going to be a lot of money spent. There was a lot of money spent in 2016. The candidate who spent the most money in 2016 for president did not win. There is a diminishing return, as Chris would point out in the research, diminishing return in politics. If you don't raise enough money to be competitive, obviously you're not going to win. But after a certain point, additional money spent chasing a relatively small number of undecided voters, many of whom may just not vote at all, starts to get like a questionable return on investment. So it's going to be expensive, but I think the underlying, I think the bigger headline is that it's going to be nasty.
Mike, these candidates are just raising ungodly sums of money for president. Are you surprised by that?
No, not at all. Not at all. And it's obviously based on the fact that Washington has a lot of power. And if we want to diminish how much is spent on elections, we want to diminish the power that people who get elected have. Well, let me say one other thing about the discussion we were talking about just a minute ago. One of the positives I see about the political environment today is in the classroom, I have more ability to talk about the differences between economic systems. A lot of young people are very much enthused by socialism, and I think we see that by the backing of Bernie Sanders. And that gives me, as an educator, an opportunity to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of different kinds of economic systems.
But there is a difference between socialism and democratic socialism.
Yes.
Which I think a lot of people lose when they say Democrats are running as socialists. A lot of them who are labeled socialists or democratic socialists as the country, as ruling parties in Europe.
What you mean is social democrats.
Social Democrats, right.
Yeah. Okay, like Bernie Sanders.
No, right.
But in terms of the policies.
Yeah, Chris Cooper, there's a lot of conversation. A lot of pundits are saying North Carolina is a swing state. It's going to be important in these 2020 elections. Do you agree with them?
Absolutely. I think we are a swing state or a purple state, or I think John calls it a middle state. We are somewhere in the middle by most metrics. Look, we've got a Democratic governor. We've got a Republican General Assembly. We have more registered Democrats than Republican in our state. If it were not an important swing state, the RNC would not be coming to Charlotte to have their convention. We're going to matter. We're going to matter in a big way.
That's in August.
That's right.
By that time, the campaigns will really be cranked up. We registered 273,000 new voters in 2019. 14 counties in our state now have half the registered voters. What does that tell you?
It tells me this is a time where people know that politics matters, right? So again, returning to Trump, I think one thing we know is that Trump has engaged people in politics, maybe for the right reasons, maybe for the wrong reasons, but people are fired up about politics in a way they have not been. We saw that in turnout in 2018.
But Chris, if I'm a statewide candidate, do I just basically campaign in 14 counties? They got half the votes.
You spend a lot of time in those 14 counties. Another thing's interesting, before when President Obama left office, I think the Republicans controlled 33 states, roughly, governorships that they lost a lot of those in 2018. And I think it's worth remembering what happened in 2018. It was in some part a repudiation of Trump and the Republicans. I don't know what's going to happen in 2020, but the trend was it was a fairly big Democratic year. And I think some of the polls in these swing states, some of these senators, not so much Tom Tillis, we'll see what happens, but in some of these other swing states, the Republicans are significantly behind.
Well, it's important to note, speaking of the Senate balance, there's 53 Republican senators. Democrats would love to take that down to 49 or 50.
If they get 4 seats, if they flip 4 seats.
Well, but they're probably going to lose Alabama, which means they've got to make up one and then gain some others. But I think Colorado, Maine, what would be the other easier flip? Arizona, those are somewhat easier to get for the Democrats. It really could come down to the Tillis race in North Carolina to determine control of the U.S. Senate. That's another reason why the spotlight will be on our state.
Interesting. So far as it goes, let's talk about the Tillis race a little bit. Mike, you follow politics too, I know that. So far as it goes, there is a widespread opinion that Tom Tillis is vulnerable in this election.
Yeah, again, a little outside my lane, but I agree. That's the impression I get by reading the papers and reading opinions of that. And I think there's an effort, obviously, to tap into those in the state who are not fans of the president to tie Senator Tillis to the president.
I want to get into some of the statewide races, but we have to broach the subject of the federal judge's ruling this week on voter ID, because I think it was important. We will not be required to show an identification when we go to the polls in March to vote.
That's right.
How significant will that be on the outcomes of the primaries?
You know, I don't think it'll have that much of an effect on who ultimately gets elected in the primary, right? So what we see is that, so in 2016, North Carolina in the primary had the voter ID. We did not have it in the general. And so that gives us some sort of clue as to what happened. And it looks like about 1 percentage point fewer folks who didn't have IDs voted. In other words, it matters, but it matters kind of at the margins.
Well, the whole concept of voter ID is the fact that we don't want to disenfranchise any voters. And so far as it goes, is there evidence of disenfranchisement, Chris?
Well, there are the overwhelming majority of people who don't have voter IDs are low-income people, people of color, people in rest homes, nursing homes, assisted living centers, people who don't have a driver's license and then who never went and got an ID. So it's clear that it favors one political party, I think, because the question is how many people does it affect, how many of those people would have voted anyway?
It's not that clear. Honestly,
I was going to say, there are plenty of states that have voter ID.
No. Look,
it is pretty clear.
It's not really, because the numbers are so very, very small. I mean, both sides exaggerate the effects of this policy or its absence for their own political reasons. But the truth is, there's several different studies and analyses of this, but basically voter ID does not appear to have much of an effect on turnout. That means it does not suppress the vote in any significant degree, but that also means there must not be large amounts of fraud that voter ID prevents. So both sides exaggerate the consequences.
Chris Cooper, last year in 2016, Donald Trump won North Carolina by 3.6 percentage points. Minority voting was down. Millennials didn't show up to the poll very much. Any evidence that might be different this year?
You know, I don't think we're going to know until we know who's at the top of the ticket on the Democratic side, right? Obviously, there are candidates in that field who are going to appeal more to millennials. There are candidates in that field who are going to.
Well, when are we going to know this? I mean,
well, after the primaries, right? and fortunately for us,
so after March 3rd, we got all this figured out.
Bring me back then, and I'll be happy to give you an answer.
Hindsight is 2020. We're going to hear a lot of hindsight is 2020 in 2020.
There you go. In Congress, Chris, we've just gone through redistricting. The prediction was that the congressional delegation will switch from to becoming 8 and 5 Republicans to Democrats. You think that's going
seems
to
the
be
most
the case?
likely, although I think there's maybe one other one that might be in play. And the other thing, as we sit here talking about hindsight, we have no idea. There could be giant events. We've talked about the possible war in the Middle East. We've talked about the economy. We've talked about a lot of things that could dramatically change this from being a close election to being a not a close election, in which case 8-5 might not be right.
2 quick questions. You see the legislature changing hands as far as control of parties is concerned?
You know, this is another one. I'm just not sure. It's going to be closer than it was before. We're going to have more competitive elections than we had before.
You sounded like an economist.
Well, on the one hand and on the other.
There you go.
I think there's a reasonable chance, not a guarantee, I think there's a reasonable chance Democrats could control the State House after the election.
The Chief Justice Supreme Court
right.
race is going to be interesting this year, I think.
Absolutely.
Newby and Beasley, and lots of money in it.
Yes, though not by comparison to the governor's race and the Senate race, the presidential race, and I think it will be largely affected by those things because these are now on the ballot partisan races.
I'm not going to ask for any predictions on it yet, but we will be getting closer to that. Let's start asking the panel to tell us something we don't know. I got 2 minutes. Chris?
More than 20 states, the minimum wage in more than 20 states went up automatically at the end of the year. North Carolina is among the states that keeps the minimum wage at $7.25, which is absurd.
Chris Cooper, tell us something we don't know.
By 2022, if current rates continue, unaffiliated will be the largest group in North Carolina politics, and some officials are already starting to change their party affiliation.
Dems are 37%, unaffiliated 33%, Republicans 30%. Mike Walden, tell us something we don't know.
Average cost of living in North Carolina is 9% under the national average. So when we make national and state comparisons, we need to take that into account.
Particularly as it relates to wage comparisons.
Yes.
John Hood, tell us something.
According to the latest census projections, after 2020, Texas will gain 3 congressional seats, Florida 2, North Carolina is one of a handful that will gain a seat. California, for the first time, will lose a congressional seat.
Interesting. It's been a great conversation, guys. You've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State, including that voter ID topic. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Today's tools make you a real DIYer, and as a member of an electric cooperative, you have lots of valuable tools to help you do it yourself in controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad.
12,000 North Carolina veterans are uninsured with no options to buy health insurance. They fought for us. Now let's fight for them. Let's create a North Carolina solution for covering the uninsured.
To learn more, visit careforcarolina.com.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.